This episode of the Sam Oldham podcast is sponsored by Turn, the only brand dedicated solely to men's gymnastics. Towards the end of my career, I started to work closely with the team at Turn to design custom uniforms that expressed who I was and where I came from, and they were always able to bring my ideas to life. For years, I wore uncomfortable gymnastics clothing until I started to wear Turn, whose uniforms are built with their attention to detail and quality in mind. Go check them out now at turn-gymnastics.com and enjoy the episode. Frank, thanks for coming on the podcast, mate. I know we did that episode where we watched the European Championships a few months ago, but I've really wanted to have this conversation for a long time. Before we start, Frank, we go back to your career. Just tell me a bit about what's your life like right now? What are you up to?
At the moment, I'm studying at the University of Nottingham, studying physiotherapy. I'm currently on my third and final year. I've just finished a clinical placement, which was in West Bridgford, which was good fun. And back to the studies now. So I've got a few modules to do, a couple more placements, and then the dreaded dissertation. But should be all right.
When's the dissertation due?
I think Jan, Feb, March, April time.
When will you be all finished with that uni?
So in the next couple of months, I'm hoping to do an interview with some of the guys on the national squad. And then once I've got that data, then it's just going through it. And then I'm hoping, I've got a fair amount of time off over December and January. We finish our exams, I think, that first week of December, and then we're not on our placement until sort of mid-January. So have a decent amount of time to get that work done. Whether or not I do it then is a different question. But hopefully towards the middle of January, I should be get in there with it.
Nice. Frank, it seems like since you retired from gymnastics, you're now doing all sorts of different sports and stuff. How you find that process, like finishing gymnastics, but then just exploring new things like running, climbing, outdoor swimming?
I'm really enjoying it. I think I've always been quite sporty, quite active. And I think after I finished gymnastics, there was always going to be that hole of, I'm not training for 4+ hours a day. So I'd need something to fill that, take all my energy up as well. So initially it was climbing that I went into. And that was a nice transition from gymnastics. You already have the sort of prerequisite strength and sort of agility and flexibility that makes you an already good climber when you start off. So I started off doing that with a couple of the guys from the university, which was really good fun. And then I've signed up for a marathon at the end of this year, on December the 31st, so New Year's Eve. I'll be running the Liverpool Marathon, hoping to raise a bit of money for Mind mental health charity with that as well. And then the outdoor swimming, like you say, I think I've managed to rope Josh Champion into doing a triathlon with me next year.
Really? Because I've noticed Josh has stopped coming to the gym with me to lift weights, and he just does blaze classes now. So that's why.
Potentially, right. Well, we sort of agreed after having a few beers that we'd do a triathlon next year. So feel free to get involved if you fancy.
I'm not sure about that, mate. I hate swimming.
Yeah, well, one of my big faults as a human is that I can see like an island or something at a distance, and I'm like, I can swim to that, and it could be like 2 miles, but I'm like, I've got this like in the bag. So this will be good to actually like test myself and see what I'm capable of. And I'm not a strong swimmer, I know that, but we'll see. I think I like the idea of trying to go up to a half Ironman. I think a full one is too tough.
What's a half?
I think it's a mile swim. It's a half marathon, and then God knows about the cycle.
All right.
But
have you dipped your toe into cycling and swimming yet, or just mainly just focused on the marathon?
I did a bit of cycling a few years back. I had like my ankles, I've got like glass ankles, and they were really sort of flared up at one point, and to keep a bit of fitness in my leg, I was like cycling to the gym and back, then just doing the work on the other 4 pieces. So I suppose that's my my dip into cycling. I'll get into that in the new year, get this marathon cleared first, and then focus on the triathlon. But hopefully Josh is up for it still.
Mate, you're gonna have to persuade me a bit more to do a triathlon.
I'll get you a few beers and then we'll see what you're saying.
But Frank, let's go back. I want to go back to when you started gymnastics. I think a lot of people would be surprised meeting you today and seeing how funny you are, confident and open, that when I first met you for the first time, you were very different. You were reserved, you were quiet, you were almost mute. You never really spoke to anybody. When you look back now, Frank, like, what were some of the factors you think that played into that? Do you think you were just like that as a kid, or, you know, was it maybe the environment, the people you were around a little bit? Because it was like, back then it was just, oh, that's just Frank. But, you know, when you look back in hindsight, you're like, oh, that is quite, there was nobody else that was quite like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was quite an outgoing child at home. You know, I've got 3 brothers, and we were always like, you know, just boys will be boys, just messing about, always getting into trouble and whatnot. But at school, I was a bit more shy, a bit more reserved. And then, yeah, like you say, when I went into the gym, I don't know what it was that made me like that, but I was essentially mute. And it's probably something that you'd look back at and be like, is that an autistic tendency or something?
Right.
But I think it was just, I think Jeff was quite a loud person in the gym. And I think I just wanted to be, you know, well-behaved and not get in trouble. I didn't want him shouting at me. So I just, you know, shut up, get on with my work. And I was just, like you say, I didn't talk to anyone. But it sort of, you know, allowed me to just focus on what I was doing and just progress quite quickly in the sport when I started at quite a late age compared to when most people start.
What age were you when you started, Frank?
It was just before my 9th birthday.
Really? So you're 8 when how did you get into gymnastics?
So we had a trampoline, and one of my pals taught me how to do a flip on it, a front flip, and I started doing it with my eyes closed. I think my mum and dad were like, all right, let's take him somewhere that he can learn how to do this without getting hurt, which was a bad mistake because I got hurt. So, but yeah, so that's how I got into it, and then went to Southport Gymnastics Club, started in the recreational class, and then quite quickly progressed onto the development, and then into the main comp squad.
What role did gymnastics play in your early life, Frank? Like, did it very quickly become your life, gymnastics? You know, you started at a later age. That is quite a late age. I mean, 8 years old, nearly 9. Yeah, that's pretty unheard of. That.
Yeah, I think so. I think I made the squad when I was 12 years old. So it was like 3 years. I think there was like a gradual like improvement. So first time I went to the NDPs, I think I came like 21st, and then it was like 18th, and then the third time around I came 10th, and it was like the cut off to make the squad. So like fairly quickly it became like a huge part of my life. But again, I don't think it was like the main thing. I had, you know, I was still doing a bit of rugby. I was still just messing about with my brothers and whatnot. So yeah, it was never like the be all and end all at such a young age. It was when I sort of got into the early teens that it became, you know, the sole focus.
So it wasn't like something that you'd got in and like watched gymnastics on TV and was like, right, I want to go to the Olympic Games. It was more like just something your parents had put you in basically to try and keep you safe, and it just naturally progressed into what it became. Yeah.
Again, I remember watching it on the TV, but I can't remember watching it and being like, wow, that's something that I want to do.
Right.
And I just got into it and then sort of found out that I enjoyed it, and like flipping around and doing this, that, and the other was good fun.
Did you play? Because you played rugby. Did you play rugby at the same time as well?
I think I started rugby when I was about 13 years old, and I was tiny at that point. So I think it was just like the concern between my coaches at the gym that I would potentially get injured doing rugby, and at that point it was like the decision. You know, gymnastics is progressing. Do you stop rugby and whatnot? And I think, like in terms of the decision that I made, it was the right decision for my gymnastics career. But I really enjoyed rugby. Yeah. I think it was good fun. It's something that I thought about doing when I finished gym this time around. But you know, it's just vicious, and I definitely get injured doing that.
I can remember you rugby tackling people in manhunt.
Yeah.
When we used to play manhunt, I'd be like, I'm not getting caught by Frank because he's going to take you down. Like he's going to take you out.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Like again, I was tiny when I was doing it, and I remember at school playing against one of my friends, and he was twice the height of me, and I remember just like, because I genuinely didn't have any fear when I was going in for a rugby tackle, just tackling him, and literally like him rolling over me like several times, and I just got up and I was like, oh, okay, let's go.
Frank, I remember meeting you for the first time. I think it was at a training camp at Lilleshall, and I think you probably would have gone from the fringes of the elite performance squad to the junior squad, and they were trying to move you up quite quick. And I can remember as we used to do tumbling at the end of our warm-up, and we've gone onto track, and we'd do like the 5 backflips straight back, and then we'd have to do a double back. And this was just a warm-up, it wasn't a track session yet, and you ended up doing a 1.5 punch double front. and I'm looking at people around it, like in our group, going, has he just done that? And you did it. If I was going to try that at 13 or 14, I'd just do a normal double front with like my legs apart. But you did it with your legs together and stuck it. And I kind of looked at you and Sergey and went, oh, this is a dangerous relationship. Because I was like, if Sergey told me to do something crazy, I'd like push back. But at that point, I'd watched you and this guy isn't going to push back. He's going to do everything that he tells him to do. Yeah. When you look back at that time, what was your relationship like with like Jeff in the gym at the time? And what was your role within the group? You, Dan, Josh was there. Yeah, what was that like?
So yeah, in a similar sort of vein, I moved up groups quite early. So once I made the squad when I was 12 years old, I moved up into Jeff's group. And for me, it was, it was a dream come true. I'd started at the club and I'd always said this throughout, whenever anyone asked me a question, who's your role model? Like, who is your idol in gymnastics? And everyone would say, Kohei Uchimura, Alexei Nemov. Yeah. For me, it was Dan. Like, from the day I stepped inside the gym, I saw him and I saw what could be achieved in the sport. And also, he remains just a lovely bloke. So, to train alongside him and see the skills that he was doing. He's 5 years older than me, so at that age, he's 17. He's going into that sort of junior Euros sort of build up and whatnot. And just getting to see like his level of gymnastics, and that's something to aspire to. But again, at that age, I was mute. So my role in the group was I just didn't talk. I just got on with the work and, whatever work was put on my plate was, what I'd do. So,
When you look back, Frank, where do you think you're, I don't know if you've ever seen this in football. There's like a meme and it's kind of like, it's for footballers that were incredibly skillful, did things that like other players just couldn't do. And everyone like players like JJ Okocha a long time ago, and people will, people would say, "Oh, the streets will never forget those guys." And I feel like that a little bit about your gymnastics career. Like anybody that knows, when you talk about beautiful lines and beautiful gymnastics, everyone says your name, especially the guys within Great Britain. Where do you think your lines came from? Where did you think that came from? Was that something that, you just developed yourself? Was it like pushed? Was that an influence from Jeff, or was it watching Dan? Because when you see Frank Baines do a piece of gymnastics, straight away, without seeing your face, that's Frank Baines doing gymnastics.
Yeah, I think potentially one of the big factors for my gymnastics was Sergey. Right. When I first came onto the squad, he was my coach that I started off working with, and I remember my handstand shape in particular was just not a great shape. It was like my bum was always out, chest was out, and Sergey spent a lot of time working with me just on improving shape, and he really influenced my gymnastics. And I mean, what Sergey's like, it was just one more. And I was happy to do that. And but he really emphasized like the line and everything that I did. And once I think once I corrected my handstand shape, everything else sort of fell into place.
Right.
I think I always had that sort of like nice toe point, like extended legs and everything. But yes, Sergey influenced my handstand a lot, I'd say.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And what was your relationship like with Jeff back then when you were still younger and you were growing up? Was it very much like Jeff set the program, you just did it?
Yeah, I think sort of in those early years, yeah. So before Jeff, my coach, before making the squad, was a guy called Arthur Masters. Right. And he's just, one of the nicest blokes I know. Very good with young gymnasts, really knows how to talk to them. So I think when I first made the squad at Southport, he was my coach. I think I'd been like messing about a little bit, and we were circling on pommels, ran down one end of the gym, and Arthur just sat me down and said, "Look, that's not what we do. When we're on pommels, we circle on pommels, we don't go off and do some tumbling." And I was like, from that point on, yeah, okay, that's what we do. So he sort of set that method in place, like how I approached my work. And from that point on, there were no more issues with behaviour or anything. Right. And he would set the programme, and then Jeff obviously set the programme. And Barry had a big influence when I first made the squad as well, because he'd come to the club. So that programme was sort of set in place by my coaches. And then I think probably around about age 15, I took a lot more ownership of my program. And I was, I'd come in and I knew that this is what I needed to do. This is where I want to get to. And these are the steps that I need to do to get there. So I think 15-ish, I took a lot more ownership of my program. And
was that something you were vocalising at that point, still at 15, Frank, or you were still not really, you were just inside your head, you knew exactly what you needed to do?
Yeah, I think, I didn't vocalise it, and again, Jeff still had a huge input in what I was doing, but I think I knew, okay, this is how I need to warm up. And I was very, very obsessive about how I did my warm up.
Right, okay.
Like, this is my first go, and that continued throughout my entire career. This is how I warm up. I've still got a warm up routine that I've been doing since I was like 13 years old, which makes me feel ready. And then like on each piece of apparatus, I had that. But yeah, it was the way that I felt was the best for me. So,
yeah. And then you go to the Junior Europeans in 2010, and you're the youngest member of the team. We do really well, and then in the build up to 2012, you then become like the main guy, the next guy, as it were. Talk to me a little bit about the Junior European Championships in 2012, Frank, and just that period of your life.
So yeah, I think I was about 16 years old there. And in a sense, like you say, I've been to a Junior Euros already, so without sort of like anyone vocalizing it or anything, I was the captain of that team, and it was, I was the most senior figure. The most senior figure at 16 years old is like, you don't know anything. But at that stage, we were just worked, and I would say worked, within an inch of our lives. Like, I remember having some pretty bad twisting problems at that time that had started at the beginning of that year, and it was terrifying doing floor routines. So I remember like all the comps, all the control comps, all the routines that I did before that competition, I'd put my arm up and I was like, I don't have a clue if I'm going to do this or not. It was 2 tumbles in particular, handspring double twist, punch full, and then round off 2.5, punch half. And it was just like the double twist and 2.5, I'd either do a double twist and 2.5, or I'd do full twist and 1.5. And I actually, in the all-round final at the Euros, ended up doing 1.5, punch half, landed it on my feet, and I was just like, okay, guess we're going with that. Right. And whether or not that was because of the stress of the build-up, like the amount of routines that we were having to do, I remember days that I'd come in and I would do 4 routines on all 6 pieces.
And was that like at Lilleshall, or was this back home, or both?
So that was at Lilleshall. Back home, I'd do a lot of routines, like 2 routines on each piece. But when we got to Lilleshall and we got to the build up to that Junior Euros, I think because there was just a lot of stress put onto our team, because obviously yourself, you'd won it back in 2008. That's the first time it's happened. Then 2010, we win it again. By 2012, that was the expectation. And if we didn't win it, then we disappointed BG. And there was so much stress on us.
Do you feel as well, because in 2012 was when Sergey stepped back, right? So Barry stepped into that role.
Yeah.
And do you feel like part of that was the pressure on him as well to then also repeat those results? It was just pressure from the top down.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And it's, it's pride as well. You don't want to be that person who mucks it up. And
because when I look back at that, and, we had Niall on the podcast, but we didn't really talk about this, but you look back at those pictures of Niall and he's skinny. You can tell he's like, and he talks about that being a really difficult period in his life, just a lot of stress, starting to try and control things. I think a lot of his eating habits began around that time.
They definitely did. I think, I remember like the 2 weeks in the lead up to the competition, like none of us ate any sweets or chocolate, no Coke or anything, which was a fucking nightmare for me, because I have got the sweetest tooth known to God.
Was that coming from anyone else, or was that intrinsically coming from you guys? Because you were feeling like
it was coming from other people. It was, if you don't eat that, you're going to perform better. Which, really, is that the case? Because it's what I was used to in the whole build-up. And I mean, we stuck to it religiously, and I remember just being like, oh. Do you remember the drifters in the vending machine at Lilleshall?
Okay, yeah.
Oh, those chocolate bars, so good. That was, you know what I'm talking about, Sam. I remember walking past the vending machine on the way to dinner every day, and I was just like, I'll kill one of them. I will just absolutely destroy a drifter right now. But, I stuck to it because that is the belief that was instilled in me. If I probably, because the strength of your mind, if I had a drifter, I probably wouldn't have competed as well as I did at the Junior Euros.
And when you look back, so obviously you guys win as a team, you come first, you win the all around. How do you now sit with that as a 28-year-old man, and you look back, do you go, okay, that was worth that? Or do you look back and go, right, what happened, but I think I could have done that in a different way?
Yeah, I think certainly that's, you could go a different way about it and probably get the same results. Because I think the thing was that we were just pushing such big skills at that time that, you know, there were several different team configurations that we could have sent to that competition and come out with the same result.
Right,
The other 5 guys on the squad that didn't go to the competition are just as good as us. Like, we were a very good, like, big squad of gymnasts at that point. But pretty soon after the competition, you know, I was told that junior gymnastics, no one cares about junior gymnastics. So the result itself was sort of invalidated for me. So looking back on it, it's obviously an achievement that I am proud of now. And once you sort of reflect on your experience of gymnastics, you look at it and you think, okay, yeah, no, I am actually proud of that. I'm proud of my time on the squad as a whole. But at the time, it just, okay, yeah, no one cares about junior gymnastics.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? There's all that pressure on your shoulders going into that event, and it seems extreme.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, there are conversations that you hear or you're told, oh, nobody cares now. And it's like, what? Hang on a minute. I was under all this pressure, but now it's not important. It's on to the next. And Frank, at what point did you transition into the senior team? And also, did you find that transition difficult in terms of you being isolated from your peer group?
Yeah, so pretty much immediately after that Junior Euros, it was sort of decided that I'd be going up into the senior program next year. So 2012, 2013, beginning of 2013, I'd move up a year earlier than I could have or potentially should have. And yeah, like you say, I think it's something that I hadn't appreciated, but there was a competition in Australia that a few of the guys went to, the Australian Youth Olympics. And in hindsight, that would have been a fun competition to go to, right? Like, you went there, you enjoyed it. And I moved up into the senior program, and did it make much of a difference? Ultimately, no, because I ended up getting injured at the end of that year anyway. But you know, that was the decision that happened at the time. And yeah, it was good fun. Like, while I was sort of, like you say, taken away from my group, I was put into the new group, and you know, I got to hang out with yourself and Keatings and Theo at the DTB competition, and that was awesome. I remember, like, obviously Daniel Keatings, he's one of the best gymnasts that we've ever had as British gymnastics, and I was there sharing a room with him, and I was just like, oh, this is nuts. Like, and we were watching a TV show called Person of Interest, I think it was. I remember, like, you kind of like see Keatings from a distance, and you just think he's that straight-laced dude, and he is, like, but he's nuts, and I love how nuts he is. And I remember just sharing with him, and I was like, I did not expect him to be like this. So that, yeah, it had its pros and its cons. Like, I got to acclimatise with you guys for a bit, and that was really nice.
Did you ever feel like stuck between two generations? Because I remember myself feeling like that. Like, when they moved me up early at 17, it was kind of like I was segregated, because I'd go to training camps, and instead of being with the guys that were my age now, they were putting me with the seniors. So they were already almost like, not pitting me against them, but, you know, just naturally as kids, if I'm not training with them, I'm not in your group, now you think you're with the older guys, and it's quite a difficult position to be in, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't quite know how to play that, I think, as a young person. You don't have the experience or the maturity to know what to do. And I think at times I did feel like stuck between those two generations. And
and it had happened once before, obviously, with the Junior Euros back in 2010, where I was sort of training with yourself, Reese, Ashley, Max, that sort of age group, and then obviously taken away from my cohort of gymnasts, and then obviously it happened with the seniors again. But I think the difference there was that the seniors are allowed to, like, you know, warm up and do this by themselves, whereas the juniors, you go off and do the fun sort of stuff like trampoline and whatnot. And I remember warming up, and I was like, oh, I'm just having so much fun on trampoline. But yeah, it's got its pros, it's got its cons. But yeah, it was overall, like, I'd still go and hang out with those guys in the evenings and whatnot. We're still best friends and whatnot. So
after that, Frank, you know, you get through 2013, you go into 2014, you kind of have your breakthrough year, really. Like, you do really, really well. You go to the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. Were you the youngest member of the team then?
Yeah.
Youngest member of that team, and is that Scotland's best ever result?
I think so.
At that Commonwealth Games. And it was big, right? Like, they'd made a big deal about England against Scotland. It was in the Hydro Arena. There's 15,000 people there. And you could then go on to be selected for the world's team. You go to China, Nanning in the same year. Just tell me a little bit just about that year, about the Commonwealth Games. And, you know, that must have felt for you like, oh, wow, I've made it here. You know, you've kind of followed that blueprint of Keaton's going from junior, stepping straight into senior, like Dan doing it, myself. Yeah. Then you were kind of the next person to come along.
Yeah. So sort of early 2013, I'd made the decision to compete for Team Scotland. Like I mentioned before, Dan's one of my idols. Dan Keaton's also one of my idols. To compete alongside them was the opportunity of a lifetime. So yeah, I followed in their footsteps. Back end of 2013, I had a pretty significant injury. I got lost in a high bar dismount, landed on my head, fractured vertebrae T1 to T4. So that took a considerable amount of time out of my career. I think it took about, from start to finish, 6 months until I was back competition fit. So coming back from that, I was sort of rushing at the beginning of 2014 to get that competition fitness, to get those skills back at first, but then to get competition fitness as well. I had a few good competitions at the start of 2014. One really good experience out in Brazil. That was myself, Ashley, Christian, and Dan Keatings. And it's one of those nightmare competitions where you go out, suitcase didn't arrive. I was literally wearing the same pair of underpants for like 5 days. But had a great time with those guys. And again, it's one of those first opportunities that I've had to sort of hang out with them a bit more. Yeah. And then had a pretty good competition there as well. I think I was reserved for the Europeans that year. So I got that sort of introduction to how it works on a senior level. It's no longer juniors. It's, you know, I was the reserve there, not the travelling reserve, but I did all the build up at Lilleshall and everything. And then going to that Commonwealth Games build up, you know, I had high expectations of myself at that time, and we did really well as a team. I remember, because it was a strange competition. It was split over 2 days. So the first day we'd sort of like not had the best day of competition, so we were sort of lagging behind a little bit. And then on day 2 we really excelled, and I'd done 2 vaults at that point, P-bars, high bar, and made all 3 finals on the second day. So I had a really good second day of competition. And then I think I was knackered, you know, like I'd done the build up and I think I just got that timing wrong. So I'd done my heavy weeks a little bit too close to the competition, and I was just cooked. And it was pretty back to back. So I think just my finals weren't as good as I'd hoped for, which, you know, it happens. Competition is in its life. But to experience Commonwealth Games at that age, it was just incredible. And again, like I say, alongside Dan and Dan, and to see them achieve. Keaton's obviously had the comp of his life, and just that Pommery team was something else. And then Dan Purvis winning P-bars as well. It was just, I look back on my career, and sometimes, you know, I didn't have the best competition, but I can see my friends do well, and that gives me as much joy as if I'd gone out there and won the medal. So and then skip forward a few months to Nanning, and I was travelling reserve there, which was good fun, and again an opportunity to experience that on the world stage. And it was interesting. It was out of this world, and to see like the gymnasts like Uchimura, like his all-round final that year was something else. He stuck every tumble on floor, rings dismount, vault. I think he just didn't stick his P-bars and high bar routine. So to see that up close and personal was like, it's a different level. But, you know, it just heightened my desire to be on that team in future. Yeah.
Frank, we've kind of jumped over it a little bit, and I've probably got my timings wrong. But just talk to us a little bit about that injury in 2013. So just tell me about that day, because that was obviously just a massive a massive point in your career, but probably a really big thing to have happened to you just in your whole life. So just tell us a little bit about that day and the build up to the injury.
Yeah. So it was in the build up to the World Championships trials in 2013. And we'd done one trial at South Essex, and I'd done really quite well on P-bars there. And I think, you know, I had a good shot at making the team, potentially, if I did a good job at the London Open. I was really just sort of pushing high routines on floor P-bars and high bar. And I was doing a dismount on high bar that I'd competed previously in the past, but not done for like, I don't know, 2 years or so.
Okay.
I was just trying to put in every skill that I had to up the start value. And it was a Wednesday afternoon. Everyone's just finished up pretty much. It was just the likes of... It was just the guys that would go down to Lilleshall in a week normally. And I remember Dom came over and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go to lunch now. You come in?" And I was like, "I got one more like second half to do and then I'll come." And he was like, "Okay, cool." Do the second half, got to the dismount, kicked off the bar. And as soon as I kicked off, I just got lost. And I think ultimately what I did, aiming for double-double, I did half a twist and then 2.5 somersaults to square land on my head. And I remember it was that biscuit mat and then one of those thin mats, and the force that went through my head and through my back and neck, it knocks me sick. And like I'll wake up occasionally now like shocked, like fuck, like thinking about that very moment. And when I did it, the first thing I did, I just stood up. I was like, I need to know that I can use my legs. And then after that, I was like, right back down on the ground. I am wiped. So I was seen by physio and doctor and checked out. And the decision there was, okay, you're all right. Just go to lunch. The advice I was given, go to lunch, don't fall asleep.
So you were able to stand up and walk off and...
Yeah.
Wow.
So
and that seems, I mean, if you see what goes on now, if there's just a small collision on a football pitch,
yeah.
So at that point you've landed square on your head off the high bar, which is 2.8 meters high anyway. Yeah. You've gone higher than that because you've done dismount.
Having learned about
was there anybody in there?
Injuries,
was there anyone medical in the gym at the time?
Medical, not in the gym. So this is where, you know, it's serious, because Theo, of all people, who just like normally would laugh at you if you hurt yourself, he sprinted across the other side, got the physio, got the doc, and was like, "Get over there now. He needs some help." And yeah, having learned about this injury, I am incredibly lucky to be able to walk, to be able to like function as normal. The only thing that has changed since then, I can't smell. I've not got a sense of smell, and essentially I've just hit my head so hard that the olfactory nerve is no longer firing as it should be. Other than that, I've got everything. Having learned about that injury in my studies at university, you know, there was one case in particular during first year, and they always sort of warn you about these things. They say, you know, if you feel triggered or anything, just take a step outside. And we were learning about this guy who'd sort of dived into a swimming pool, dived into the sea whilst he was just on a lad's holiday. The wave had broke and he just hit his head and it just clicked like that, paralysed from the neck down. And I just remember thinking, fuck, like I am so lucky that I can walk, I can, you know, function as I'm able to. But then also in hindsight, we've learned about things. So there's a thing called the Ottawa C-spine rule, where if you fall from a height of 91.5 centimeters, I think it is, onto your head, you need an X-ray. Like you said, I fell from 2.8 plus meters. Like I needed an X-ray. I didn't fall asleep at lunch, but I was knackered. And Dom called my mum, Dom Cunningham, he called my mum up and he was like, "Karen, you need to come and pick him up. He's not in a good way." And my mum came and picked me up and she was like, "All right, we're going to hospital." I remember stopping off for a KFC on the way back home. And then, you know, it's serious again when you're in A&E, and I went through, spoke to them, and like before I could even go and sit, they were like, "Okay, go sit back down, they'll get in touch." Before I could even get my bum on a seat, they were just like, "All right, Frank, get on." And I'm put on a stretcher, like secured in place, and they were like, MRI, this, that, and the other. And yeah, a fracture T1 to T4, so that derailed my career for 6 months or so. And in hindsight, as I'm saying, very lucky to be able to walk, but almost immediately it was like, I just need to be back in the gym. I need to be back training and whatnot. So I was back in and I was doing leg works, like leg conditioning and fitness training and stuff.
What was the process, Frank? Like, you just explained where it was the fractures were, just for people listening, for the layman. Where is that those fractures were?
So your neck is like the cervical spine, and then mine was T1 to T4, so thoracic spine, which is just below that. So, damage to anywhere there can give you issues with sort of respiratory stuff down your arm. And then, if you were to sever the spinal cord, then anything below that as well. So legs,
right.
etc. So,
and what was the recovery process on that?
I was put in a neck and back brace, so I kind of looked like Iron Man for a little bit,
right.
And it was just immobilized me. Fortunately, I didn't have to have any of the traction or anything, because that would have been halo in my head and then pull up. I was just literally in a neck brace that came up to here, around to here, and it was just no mobilizing of that specific area. Sleep in that, eat, everything.
How long was that for, Frank?
It's about 3 months, I think.
Really? Wow.
So significant muscle wastage and whatnot of the upper body.
And from that you get back in 6 months to almost competing again.
Yeah.
I mean, that just seems ludicrous.
Doing a roll out, mate, on floor.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think the first competition was in late February. So that happened August. So.
Yes. Yeah. 6 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a quick turnaround.
How did that impact, maybe at the time you said straight away you were thinking about getting back to the gym. I need to get back to the gym. I want to compete. But, in hindsight, looking back at that, how did that impact you both physically, but more importantly, mentally? What impact do you think that had on you, that experience? Again,
I probably, at the time, I couldn't see it because I was just tunnel vision on getting back to competing. But I think in hindsight, I was never going to be the athlete that I was before that injury. Coming that close to paralysis, I was scared of the sport. And in the years following it, I had some other injuries and stuff, but each one sort of cemented in that fact that I am a human and I wouldn't trade any aspect of my physical health for any achievement. I would not do that. If I came out of gymnastics and, like I say, I've got glass ankles, but I can still run, I can still do this and the other. If I didn't have that physical ability to do what I wanted to, I wouldn't trade it for any achievement. So,
well, what do you feel like? Do you feel like back then, at that age, your mindset was very different to that?
Yeah. And again, it's maturity, isn't it? But you just see what the goal is, and at that goal, I just saw myself as a gymnast. Without gymnastics, I wasn't anything. And you validate your success with medals, and looking back on it, I validate my success with other things, like the fun experiences that I had with yourself and others. But yeah, it was just that tunnel vision for the goal. So for me, as soon as I got injured, I was like, okay, Europeans is this time next year. I need to be back for then. And I was going to push those deadlines with, all right, the physios and stuff are going to want to hold me back, but I need to be back. So it's pushing to be back.
So you have that year in 2014, Frank, really successful. You're a key member of the senior team now. Just tell me about that next probably 12 months. So 2015, building up into 2016, what was that like for you? Gymnastics wise, but also just around that time.
So 2015, I had a bit of an up and down year. I sort of got off to an iffy start. I had a few competitions that just weren't great. I was trying some new skills, and then one competition that was really good. Ultimately didn't get selected for the Europeans, but got selected for the European Games later on in the summer. So that was a big opportunity for myself. And at that point, I had that backlog of competition experience now. I was doing routines that I felt comfortable with. In the build up to it, I was feeling good. I was going into that competition thinking, I've got a good chance at getting some really good results here, similar to like yourself in Glasgow 2014. Yeah. 2 days before the competition, I was doing routines, and I did a Kovac on high bar, and my guard locked, and I wrapped my arm around the bar. 3 things happened. My guard tore. I tore the extensor tendon here, and I ripped my fingernail clean out. And if any of those hadn't happened, you've heard it with the American, like Chris Brooks, I think it happened with him, yeah. Like fractured, radius ulnar, like that was going. So those 3 things saved me from a break. I ended up getting that fingernail put back in, which was a horrendous story in itself. But that tendon, my hand was swollen like huge. So I'm sat there thinking I'm not competing. I've put all this work in, and I'm not going to be able to compete. The decision was with the coaches, and sort of the underlying tone was that, we've flown you all the way out here to Baku. We kind of need you to compete. So I did a floor routine and a vault, and I narrowly missed out on the floor final. And I remember doing the routine, and I remember just like, because I did a rollout in that routine again, triple Russian, wide arm lift. I remember like, when you get that like hot sweat, and you feel like you've gone white and you're about to pass out. I remember presenting at the end of that routine and being like, I'm gonna pass out here. And again, it was similar to the Commonwealth Games, where it was qualification was split over 2 days. So I did the floor routine the first day, and then went back into the training gym and had to practice a vault, and then did CAS 2.5 the next day. And I remember just like being in a huge amount of pain, but also being like, fuck, all that work, like. With my injuries, I just got injured at the wrong times. Like, there's right times to get injured, there's wrong times, and that was just the wrong time for me. So again, I was playing catch up there. We had the World's Trials a few months later. I'd managed to get back on all 6 pieces, but then about 4 weeks out from the competition, I ended up rolling my ankle and doing a grade 2 tear to the deltoid ligament. And I remember again just being like, why is this just consistently happening? I'm just getting injured right before the competitions. I ended up doing all the trials, like taping my ankle. Again, it was just agony doing them, but I just took the painkillers, warmed it up as best as I could, and put up with the pain when I did the routines. And I managed to put in some good showings there, but ultimately it came down to myself or James to be the reserve for the team. And James got the place. And again, I was so happy for him. It was his first experience sort of getting that opportunity to go and be that reserve for a team. And he had a great time as well. And the boys, I went down and supported them in Glasgow, and they got a silver medal. But it's kind of getting to that point as well where, I've been there. I've seen the team success, and I want that for myself. But I was just missing it every time. So yeah, going into 2016, again, I kind of had the knowledge that it would be very difficult for me to make the team, just purely because I didn't have that experience of competing at a world level. But I was going to give it my best shot, and I was doing really well at the start of the year. We went to a training camp in Portugal and then Brazil. Yep. And I was really flying at that point. And in Brazil, I remember just being steadily more and more fatigued. And I don't know if you remember, but we'd finish our first session and then go back to the hotel. It was like a half-hour journey back there, and then we had such like a long time to wait for the food as well. Yeah. So we were just like, I think that just delay in getting our recovery in just got me at the end of that. And I remember it was the last day we were out there. I ended up rolling this ankle this time around and doing the exact same injury. I just remember thinking like, I remember how sore this was and how difficult it was to recover. I don't know if I can do this again. Ended up coming back and tearing the cartilage in my shoulder. So I was dealing with upper limb, lower limb injury in the build up to the Olympics. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm not going to be able to do all round. That's my opportunity to do an Olympic Games out the window. And then it was focusing on the next year, which is a long way away, but also, yeah, you just look at the next opportunity that you get. So when
you look back, Frank, at that time period, and if you kind of you think about the neck, and then all those injuries that came after that.
Mm-hmm.
When you look back at the way you were training, the way you were approaching things, and, you're sat there and you're going, why does this keep happening? Like a few weeks out from a competition, training's going amazing, and then it just keeps falling apart, I keep getting injured. If you were to put that down to something specifically, what do you think the leading contributor towards that was?
I think it's probably just not being able to handle the load. And again, it's unlucky in times as well, just rolling your ankle, but that's happened because you're probably fatigued. And after that back injury, I probably didn't have that adequate amount of time to build my physical strength, resilience back up to a point that, I'm able to deal with the load that's put on me. Injuries are because of an imbalance in load and ability to manage that load. And I think that's what it was. It was just, I was always sort of playing catch up, and that's what I'd put it down to, that and just being generally unlucky. In
a way, does it almost become like a form of gambling in that you're so far behind, you have to almost go, you've got to go so big to get back, and that gap between where you were and where you need to get to be just grows over time, and you start to take more risks. Yeah.
And then you see, the guys who are established in that team and what they're scoring is, okay, I need to get that. And not only do I need to get that, but I need to go above that, because you're not going to put me on the team if I'm just coming in and scoring the same. It's
how were you managing all those injuries at the time, Frank? Were you taking a lot of painkillers at the time to get through all of that? Because that's a lot. There are a lot of injuries there, and they're back to back. Did it just at times become like that was just part of your everyday routine? It was just part of your life?
Yeah. So with my back injury, I was on diclofenac for about 8 months of my life.
Right.
And then
every day.
Yeah. And I wouldn't take it, with any direction. It was just, I'm feeling a bit sore, like I'll pop a diclofenac. It wasn't, 2 weeks on it, all right, to deal with this specific cause. It was just 8 months I had a supply of it. And after that, I sort of just coincidentally heard someone say, you can really fuck your stomach up if you're on that for a long time. And that sort of got me thinking, all right, or maybe I should come off this.
Yeah.
And then, didn't really touch it as much unless I was prescribed it for specific things. So when I had my wrist injury in Baku, I used the naproxen that I was prescribed through Team GB. And with those ankle injuries and shoulder injuries, for a short period of time, I would use the medication. But I relied a lot more on, recovery methods like ice bath, sauna, stretching, massage, instead of relying on that medication. But yeah, I was on it for quite a considerable period of time.
And during that period, Frank, in the lead up to Rio and those few years, was there ever a point that anyone ever came up to you and said, like, how are you, Frank? Because I can remember periods where you would start to do, for someone that was a mute when you were very young, you'd shout, you'd scream, you'd swear, you'd punch things. And I can remember one day there being like a situation where like that had got quite heavy. And I was kind of looking around at like the adults in the room going, is anyone going to ask him if he's okay? Because no one's going to ask him if he's okay. Yeah. Why is no one going to ask him if he's okay? Like, did that ever happen during that period? And looking back at that now, would you say I was really struggling?
Yeah, certainly I would. No one really opened up that conversation. But again, I think it was, you say a different time. I think sort of awareness of mental health is becoming a lot better. We're becoming a lot more progressive, but at the time, it just wasn't really spoken about. And like you say, the signs were obvious. I was fucking struggling. And I think being in that high-pressured environment in Lilleshall every week was just, it broke me. And, having come so close so many times as well, and I've said this to you before, I think that the athletes who don't make the team should there should be some mandatory psychological input there. Like, how are you feeling? Even if it's just that conversation, you know, how do you feel about not making the team? Because it might open that door. Because I think over the years, it just broke me down being so close, but not getting that. And again, like I say, the opportunity to go as a reserve to a competition was great, but it's not what you want. And
even if you win that medal as a reserve, in your head, you don't count it, do you?
Yeah. No, exactly. But yeah, like you say, I was struggling at the time, and yeah.
You know, 2016, when I remember in 2016, mate, this really clearly stands out to me. I can remember, and I think this says a lot about what you've just said. You know, if you were someone that didn't make a team, and I've been on that end a lot, there was never any conversations, ever. It wasn't how are you, it was just back into the gym, get ready for the next one. And I remember going into 2016, and it almost frightened me that we had the Olympic trial. I think it was the first one. And we'd had a training camp that week, and the trial was going to be at the end of that week. And, you know, I wasn't in a good place. Like, at that time, very similar to you, me and Dan Purvis were about the only people living at Lilleshall for those 6 months in the lead up. I think you had chose to step back. And that was really not good for me. I was really unwell. I think if they'd have looked at me then, they would have said, this is somebody that is massively struggling, is depressed. Like, for sure. I was just on my own in a room every day, training on my own in a room, like, just not good for me at all. And I remember the night before that trial, walking into a room and seeing a group of athletes who had an Olympic trial the next day, but were so disengaged by the system and the squad, and felt I guess, that they weren't part of that anymore, that they were sat there, like, eating shit and drinking. And I can remember thinking, what the fuck? This is it. I can remember being frightened, and I was like, I've got to keep my head in the game because I'm still in this race right now. But these guys feel like it's all over. And they're not even bothered about how this goes the next day. I was like, something's gone wrong here. Like, just on the whole squad. Like, can you remember, like, what you felt about the sport at the time, and that was, did you struggle to feel connected to what was going on?
So again, I'd made that decision to, you know, not compete all round at these trials quite a long time in advance, but I was really pushing a new pommel routine. But for me, it wasn't, you know, I'm going to make the Olympic team if I go through this pommel routine. I'm not. Never in a million years. But it was the opportunity to try something that I could use for the future. So it's not like the pinnacle like you're describing there. It's not like, this is my opportunity to make an Olympic Games. This is my opportunity to try something that is going to come into play next year. And that's it. It's such a strange thing when the Olympics comes, because it's in the summer, and then the rest of the year it's just shut down, and you're a trainer at your own club, and no one really gives a fuck about you. Like, you're on your own. They're you and your personal coach. That's it. But so for me, that's what it was, but from quite an early part of that year. So I was kind of like, I'm just going to enjoy myself as much as I can. And I remember there are a couple of lads who were in the same sort of position. And we just, like you say, you're a bit disillusioned, but you're there at the Olympic trial, but you're not really part of the Olympic trial. So,
it was just a difficult time. And I think just generally at that point, for me, the squad felt a bit disjointed. You know, we'd had that incredible experience of, like, having 6 or 7ers that used to go to Lilleshall every week. And it was great, right? And then slowly over time that dissolved, and everybody was kind of like stepped back, went back to their clubs, and it was a difficult time. Then, Frank, you go into the new Olympic cycle. 2017, you have a great year in 2017. You know, European Championships, then World Cups. I think you did really well that year. Going into 2018, am I right?
Ooh.
Is that the year?
2018 was probably the better year for me. 2017, I went to the Europeans with yourself in Romania, in Cluj. So I had a pretty good start to the year. I had the most gnarly fall on P-bars. I think most people have seen the swing double back where I just landed square on my head. So I made the Europeans on that comp, but again, it was kind of like marred by that experience. Like, I did a really good floor routine, and I was super proud of that, but then did that on P-bars, and it kind of just made me feel like I shouldn't be on this team. I shouldn't be going to the Europeans. And I remember we came in on the Sunday and I was just in a lot of pain again with my shoulder and everything. And they were like, all right, you're on the Europeans team. And it was just kind of like, I didn't really know how to feel, like first senior major, but also I'm just quite at a low point because I've done that yesterday. Went out to the Europeans, had a pretty good experience there. Floor, pommel, P-bar, did clean routines, scored quite high. I think we were pretty close. I was first or second reserve for P-bars, and then I think similar on floor as well. So that was a good experience. Jeff came out to that one as well, which was nice. And yeah, just had a generally good time there, supporting the other guys as well who'd made finals. Obviously, James picked up a bronze medal there, which was awesome to see Jimmy get a medal. And then in the back end of the year, it's just again similar thing. It was injuries, same old story. I did a swing double back on P-bars, caught quite low, and from what I remember, it was fractured cartilage of the first and second ribs, and it was just sore. It was so sore. So again, took that sort of. I did the trials for the Worlds, but kind of with no expectation of making the team. I thought if I'd do a good floor routine, I'd potentially be up there, but sort of mucked it up in the one big trial. And then, again, another period of recovering from injury, which leads into 2018, which actually, turned out to be a really, really good year.
At which point, Frank, did you decide to make the change to move clubs? When was that?
So I moved in sort of March-ish time, 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
So that hadn't happened yet?
Not happened, no. So 2018, got back, did Scottish, British, went to the Commonwealth Games early in 2018, which was just a bloody great experience with, again, Purvis, Hamish, Kelvin and David out in Australia for a couple of weeks, which was, great. And we managed to pick up a team bronze medal, which was great. It was like a bit of a comeback medal as well, so it was really fun. And then I picked up a bronze medal individually on P-bars and had a really good competition in the all-round. And then sort of built on that. We had European trials over the summer, and I think sort of the decision for me to move clubs sort of began there.
Right.
So in the build-up to those trials, Dan was sort of... I think after that Commonwealth Games, he had sort of resigned, like, I'm probably going to retire now. So Dan wasn't really in the gym. And there was a 2-week period where it was just myself in the gym. Jeff was on holiday. And there were other coaches there, obviously, but it was me, that sort of nucleus of Jeff, Dan and me who were training, like, daily.
Yeah.
And it was the 2 weeks where I was doing 2 routines on each piece. And I remember just finishing that second week off and just thinking... that was too hard. I can't do that again. I literally cannot do that again. I always worked better when there were other gymnasts there. Like I bounced off people in training a lot more. Went to those trials. Unfortunately, didn't make the team, but I was reserve and took part in all those camps and everything for the build-up for the Europeans. And there were several competitions and everything. And I was really performing well at that time and building off the Commonwealth Games as well. I think there was, one of the lads wasn't competing as well, wasn't participating in the camps and everything. And the coaches sort of turned around and said, look, we want to put you on the team, but we can't. Imagine what it would look like. And I just sort of, I thought, one, fucking put me on the team. I don't give a fuck what it looks like. Put me on the team. If I'm doing that job, put me on the team. And two, I'm never going to make this team, because there is that image around, I can't make that team. I can't break through. Wow. So from that point on, it kind of just felt like I was competing to just be that supporting member. And
How does that make you feel? Do you know, just in your own self-worth and stuff, like, to have gone through everything you went to be so close so many times, and then for someone to say, You've made it, but we can't do it because imagine what this looks like and we don't want to take the flack. Yeah.
It just felt horrid, mate. Honestly, it felt like I was training for nothing. So that just sort of continued. And, when you fight in your body, so I had some other injuries after that and stuff, but you're also fighting your mind. It was so hard.
Do you think that broke, like, that was like the final straw that just kind of just... I think a lot of athletes have had a situation where you can take a lot of shit because you get used to that from a young age.
Yeah.
But then there's always one thing that just kind of breaks your willpower.
Yeah.
And
I think that was the beginning of the end. Went to the World's Trials later on that year, had a really good all way round, and then just mucked up on P-bars at the end, and then wasn't named as a reserve for that. Sort of second reserve almost, me and Courtney. And then one of the lads on the team get injured, so Bryn steps into that place. And after I'd not been named to the team, I'd been like, I need some time off. I need to just a bit of time away from the sport. So I'd gone on holiday with my family, which was really nice. Came back, just done the sort of standard boozing that you do once you don't make a competition. I remember coming to Lilleshall and I was just not in a great place and kind of injured as well on my wrist. And then that injury happens to the lad on the team. Bryn moves in. They sort of call me and Courtney up. And they were like, oh, you can be the reserve. And I was like, right, fair enough. Like, the opportunity to go out to another World Championships. I called Courtney up and I was like, dude, you want this? Because I'm not fit at the moment and I wouldn't feel comfortable stepping into the team if it were to happen. And he was like, no, I don't. I'm going to like focus on next year. And I was like, fair enough. Like, I'll do it. So I put myself through hell for like a week and a half before we flew out because it was such a quick turnaround. I remember being in the training gym just like, and this is not what you like, obviously I never want anyone to get injured, but I was like watching the other boys like intently like, do not get injured because I'm not ready to step into this like position. And I remember like doing all the jobs, like everything that was needed, and it came to the team qualification, did the hour warm up and then finished it. And I remember just being so relieved because it was like, all right, they're not allowed to put, legally you're not allowed to put me in. And then there was quite a delay between that and the team final. And after the competition, the coaches were like, all right, boys, you can have the day off tomorrow. We need you to rest up and then you'll get back into it day after and then build up for the team final. And I remember James saying like, oh no, I need to train. Like I just don't do well if I have a day off. And I was like, all right, that's fine. So you're not on your own. I'll come in and I'll warm up and I'll stop after the warm up, but I'm there. That was my job as a reserve to support the team. That and just play a horrendous amount of Skyrim. I was just like literally not sleeping that whole time I was there. But I went in and I did the warm up, and I remember one of the coaches coming over to me saying, "Are you not going to do anything today?" And I was like, "No, I'm just here to like support James, like just so that he's got someone else here with him." And the coach was like, "Should have brought someone else then. Why did we even bring you?" And I was like, "Fuck off!" Like to say that, I was just like, it's just like those little comments that wear you down over time. Not making the team, getting injured, it's tough.
Was that a national coach or someone's personal coach?
A national coach, yeah.
Wow.
And coming back from that competition, I was just like, it had just worn me down. Early 2019, sort of made that decision to move to Pegasus, from Southport to Pegasus. Dan had sort of retired. And I go over to Pegasus, training with James, Courtney, Unuts, RV, some of the younger lads. Obviously really sad to leave Southport, but it was, for me, the best opportunity for me to get a fresh start almost. Yeah. And I did sort of really well for the first bit, went to a few World Cups. I ended up winning high bar and P bars at Slovenia World Cup. But by that point, I was just, not enjoying gymnastics as a whole. So sort of made the decision mid-year to stop at the end of that year. Yeah. And, I'd see out the World's Trials, but, regardless of whether I made a team or not, which I genuinely didn't believe would happen, I was gonna stop. I was gonna, I say retire. I would say quit, because it was too much. It was just taking too much from me, physically, mentally. I was done. So I retired first time round, not necessarily at a low point in my career. You know, I was achieving some good results, but I was done with the sport.
Yeah. And then you obviously come back, Frank. You know, let's talk about that experience of Commonwealth Games 2022 and just what gymnastics was like for you towards the end. I'd be interested to know, like, what mindset you came into it with the second time around almost, and how you look back on that now. What memory you've got of that time period at the end.
Yeah. If I hadn't come back to the sport for that brief period of time for the build-up for the Commonwealth Games, I would have left the sport with some very sour memories. Like, as you can tell from, like, listening to what I've said, like, I was not in a good place when I left the sport in 2019. I got back into training early 2021. So I was applying for universities, and University of Nottingham really regards their student athletes. And I had not yet really begun training, but I got a call from, you know, the sports scholar recruitment guys, and they were like, "Oh, we hear you're really interested in, you know, studying at the university, and you're training for the Commonwealth Games." And I was like, "Yep." And they were like, "Yeah, we really want to have you on board." So I was like, "All right, sweet. Guess I got to start training." So gradually got back into things, and I think part and parcel what helped me just get everything back so quickly was the amount of injuries I'd had. You know, I'd done it 1,000,001 times before, just getting back into the sport from being unable to do the sport. So, like, very quickly I got all my skills back, but I was just like, I'm not going to put any pressure on myself. I'm competing for Scottish gymnastics. I'm not concerned about having any affiliation with British gymnastics as a whole. And Scottish gymnastics was just such a friendly place. You know, we had some really great people, Sam Hendrickson, Jamie Bowie, obviously the coaching staff there, who just made you feel welcome, made you feel valued. And if it was not that same sort of cohort of people, I don't think I would have done it. Okay. But again, the opportunity to compete alongside the likes of Hamish and Kelvin and some of the young lads, Pav, Cammy coming through, and David again, you know, it was just something that, you know, sung to me. And yeah, I'm really glad I did it. Yeah. Had a few good opportunities, a few good competitions, a few not so good competitions, but I'd do them and not come out and be disillusioned with it. I'd just be like, oh, that is what it is. Yeah. It's not the sole focus of my life anymore. I was doing my studies at the university alongside it, and they were, you know, really supportive of it as well. So just all in all, it was a much nicer experience second time around. And had a great experience at the Commonwealth Games as well. And it was a nice way to leave the sport with some good memories.
Frank, what would you say to, like, if there are athletes that listen to this podcast and your story sounds familiar to them, what kind of advice would you give them? You know, if you were to go back in time and to when you were in your early 20s, late teenage years, early 20s, and those times where you were struggling. I know that now you can't go back, and you know, I'm sure you would say I wouldn't do anything differently because it's meant I'm at where I am right now. But you know, if it was a friend of yours, what kind of advice would you be giving them when you look back at the experiences that you had?
I think you get so wrapped up in the short term that, you know, you don't see what you've got ahead of you. I remember there's some guys on the American team, I think it was Chris Brooks and Paul Ruggieri, and they didn't make their sort of teams until they were late 20s, like 27-ish plus. And the gymnasts that they were incredible, and they had some serious injuries as well. But you sort of build it back gradually, and you get to a point, your brain doesn't fully sort of form until you're like mid-20s, so you're a very different person in your late 20s than you are to your early 20s, late teens. And I think, just being so focused on what was next and that immediate competition, if I'd sort of thought ahead to the longer plan, you know, a year down the line, okay, these immediate ones, I'm not going to make those teams. But if I build and gradually get back and get to a point where I'm physically ready to take that load, take that everything, then, you know, I've got a better chance there than pushing myself and following that same cycle of injury, return to sport, injury, return to sport, injury, return to sport. And I guess the other piece of advice is just don't eat the yellow snow. It's not a good idea.
Frank, do you think it's easier to make that decision, and think of a long term when you value yourself a bit more? Do you know what I mean? Because I look back and I almost think at times, like, the reason I was almost self-harming, like the way I was overtraining, because I didn't think enough of myself to go, I'm not going to push for this competition because I want to look after my body.
Yeah.
And I care about it in the future. And actually, I'm going to take my time here. And, I know I'm getting pressure from all angles to be back in 6 months' time, but that's what they want. It's not what's best for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it's that outside pressure as well. It's like, if you're not taking part in this trial, why are you on the squad? Why are you on this? Like, if you don't want to be on this team, then why are you here? But that might not be the case. I've got to put my body first and foremost and do what's best for me, and then later on down the line, that's when my opportunity is going to arise. Yeah, you never know when your opportunity is going to come. Like, you
don't get to pick sometimes, do you?
No,
it can come around. You can get your opportunity when you're 18, or you can get it when you're 26, 27.
Yeah. I look at my career, and if I'd hung on for, another year and a half, obviously we had COVID and stuff. And then after the Olympics in 2021, there was World Championships, that if I'd been still competing, I potentially got the opportunity to go to that one. But God, that would have been another year and a half of just suffering.
And there will always be another competition, That's what you don't realise when you're in it. There'll be another one. There'll be another team. There'll be more gymnasts. It's a never-ending thing. At some point, you've got to jump off that treadmill and get back into things. Frank, just to finish off, you're obviously doing the marathon at Christmas, and you're doing it you're raising money for Mind. Just talk to me a little bit, quite clearly, like, you've had a difficult journey in sport, and at times you've found it quite challenging. Just tell me, what's your relationship been like with your mental health in recent years? Like, why are you running this race and trying to raise money for Mind?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned before, I had a pretty tough time throughout my career, and there was just no healthy coping mechanism for dealing with that low mood and whatnot. And then, I just coincidentally sort of spoke to a sports psychologist, and then that sort of opened those questions, those conversations, and talking helps massively so, but there's obviously so many different modalities for treatment for mental health. I think Mind do a really good job. And I've got, several friends of friends who've, unfortunately passed away. They've taken their own lives, and, it's obviously just such a big issue facing particularly young men, but, everyone as well. So I've not been particularly vocal about it in the past, but in order to, sort of, for me, do my part in a sense. I'd like to raise a bit of money for Mind, and also it's a good way of making sure that I get on with this marathon. I could have just put it off for years, but I was like, I'll give myself a target. So
amazing. Frank, just to finish off, just tell me about what your hopes are for the future, and what your plans are for the next 6-12 months.
So in the immediate future, I'm going to be finish off my degree. Hopefully by June 2024, I'll be a qualified physiotherapist, and then just sort of looking to balance mine and Portia's futures out together. I think we'll hopefully stay over in the UK for another year or so after that, and then hopefully we're both keen on the idea of going and living and working abroad.
Amazing.
Where that is, I'm not sure at the moment, but I've got an older brother out in New Zealand. He's having a great time out there, and honestly, I like the sun. I don't like these cold winter months. So somewhere hot and sunny, I think. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for sharing your story, mate. I really appreciate it. And all the best with the dissertation.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm going to need it.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.